Hello, my name is Rob. This is BigRobsVan, and on today's video, I'm going to answer a question that I get asked a lot by friends and people that are just starting to follow these types of videos. And that question is, what is the best type of vehicle to live in? Now, obviously, you know what I'm going to pick, but I thought I would just run down all the different kinds of vehicles and talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of living out of or in those types of vehicles. So let's start with number one, which would be the most obvious: a normal car. We're talking about a sedan. We're talking about a Honda Civic. We're talking about, any type of normal two-door or four-door car, sedan, a hatchback, anything like that. So what are the advantages of living in a vehicle like that? Well, I guess I should say that most people that live in those types of vehicles find themselves displaced. They find themselves unhoused. It's not a typical solution that people seek out. It's something that people find themselves doing, living out of their car. But there are some advantages to living out of a car. The first thing I would say is that you have ultimate stealth. You can park a car literally anywhere. Anywhere you go, you'll see cars parked there. So if you are a person who is displaced, you're living in a vehicle, you're living in a normal sedan type car, you can park it anywhere. You can park at the grocery store, the laundromat. I'm not gonna list every place you can park a car. You can come up with that list. But you have the ultimate stealth. That would be the number one thing. Number two, great mileage. Cars are gonna get the best mileage of literally anything mentioned on this list. So a lot of the bigger vehicles, the bigger you get, the more gas you use. So if you are on a very, very limited income, parking, driving a car around might be as a solution for you. Now, let's get to the disadvantages. The first and biggest disadvantage, obviously, is that there is no space in a car. You have the amount of space you have up front. Obviously, you can't store things in the driver's seat because you're going to need to be there. Some people may remove the passenger seat if you're going to be in a car long term. But, when you're thinking about living in a car, you only have room for the bare essentials. That would also get me to the second thing, which is it's going to be uncomfortable. There's only so many ways to sleep in a traditional car. You can lean the passenger seat back, you can remove the passenger seat like I mentioned, and put some sort of cot that runs from the front to the back. If you have a hatchback, it's possible to make a seat back there, but really your options are really limited. And then third, there is just a social stigma attached to living in a car. Very few people live in a car by choice, and I don't mean a vehicle, but like that type of car. Not a lot of people do that by choice. So when people find out you're living in a car, it may not matter to you, and you may not be able to solve that, but that is something that's going to come with that. By the way, there are people that live in cars successfully long term. Check out my buddy Eric Komp's channel on YouTube. He has been living in a car for more than 2 years. And one thing I would say is that when it comes to living in a car, I wouldn't say most people live in a car. I would say they live out of a car. So what do I mean by that? When they're living in a car, they're not staying in their car all the time. They're sleeping in the car, but during the day they're going to libraries, they're going to public spaces, they're going to places where they could cool down and get resources and things like that. So I would almost qualify that as living out of a car more than living in a car. So there's definitely disadvantage to having to do that. Let's get to the second kind of vehicle, which are pickup trucks. Now, pickup trucks are a little bit bigger than a normal car, and you have the ability to tow things, to put things in the bed, or put a camper on the bed. And that can be a snug top type camper that's flush with the truck, or that can be a big sleeper type camper. So there are advantages to having a pickup truck. Again, number one, super stealthy, especially if you live here in the Midwest. I probably see more pickup trucks than I see regular sedans. So you can park a truck anywhere, nobody's gonna look twice. If you get an extended cab with a back seat, that's a really good place to sleep. You tint those windows, curl up back there, nobody's gonna see you. You have more storage space, like I said, in the back of the bed. You can put things back there. If you have a camper, that's a little bit better because you can secure the things. And if you have a big camper, those are almost like a mini home. My grandma had a camper on the back of her thing. We went camping with her. She had a little stove. You could have all the things in there, protection, you know, from the elements, and a bigger place to sleep. So that's something that could work for you. Now, what are the disadvantages of living in a pickup truck? Well, again, the first thing I would say is you have a finite amount of space. It's a very small cab, so you're not going to be able to have a lot of the luxuries that you would have if you were living out of a bigger vehicle. You have more storage in the bed of the truck. However, you don't have direct access to that storage without some work. Some people have removed the wall in between the cab and the bed. That's possible, or even take out the window or put a sliding window. So there are solutions, but for the most part, if you have food or refrigerator and clothes, things like that are in the back of the truck, you're gonna have to get out of the cab to access those things and get back in. So that is definitely a disadvantage. Now, you may be, if you're doing stealth camping in the city, that could be a problem. If you are taking a truck off-road, because a truck is going to give you access to more places, that really should be listed as an advantage. For taking it more places off-road, then you could get out and you know, access the bed. But definitely that would be a limitation, is just having to secure those things. You can't just throw things in the back of a pickup bed and go park in the city, because somebody is liable to help themselves to your things. Now, that is going to bring us to vehicle number 3, which is the SUV. Now, SUV is very similar to a pickup. You know what I should have mentioned as an advantage of a pickup is that you can tow things. So if you have a trailer or a camper or anything like that, you could tow that easily. And the reason why I mentioned that is because you could do many of those same things with an SUV. Many large things like a Suburban or a Tahoe have a very high towing capacity, and you could also tow a camper. So I guess that's why that came to mind. But an SUV is very similar to a pickup in that you have your front area and you have the rear, but the advantage is you can reach those things. So you're in the front, you could get to the back. You can also lay down your seats. You could put a bed back there. So there are some other advantages to an SUV. If you get one with 4-wheel drive, you can access, you could go off-road to go and access places that you couldn't in a smaller car. So SUV, not a bad solution. I mean, I'm kind of going through these in order, maybe of smallest to largest, I guess I would say. So SUV, I think, is a little bit more suited to living out of a car than a straight up pickup. The disadvantage of SUV, all the things we've said before. You got a limited amount of space, you have limited headroom, so you're not gonna be standing in the back of an SUV. You're gonna be crawling around on your hands and knees, trying to get into a bed situation, trying to uncover things, get stuff out of storage, layers and layers of storage and moving things. It's not the most convenient vehicle to live out of, but it will do. And if you look on YouTube, people living out of SUVs, there are lots of people doing it. So it is definitely a possible solution. Let's move to vehicle number 4. And number 4, I think for me, personally, would be the barrier of entry if I had a choice, and that is the minivan. So there are many minivans available on the market today. Now, one of the problems, well, we'll get into the disadvantage in a minute, but let's talk about the advantages. The advantage, more space. You have way more space than you have in an SUV. You have more headroom, you have more clearance. You're not gonna stand in a minivan, but you can walk around hunched around. Obviously, if you've ever got into a minivan, you know you may have walked into the rear seats and you could walk bent over. So you can get around inside a minivan. And I think a minivan, some of the advantages, number one, that is the minimum size of vehicle, I think, where you're gonna be able to start putting decent sized appliances. That's where you're going to be able to get your refrigerator that runs off of 12 volt. That's where you're going to be able to get solar, maybe, that goes on top of the roof. That, I mean, that's a bare minimum for a minivan. I think that's probably more suited for a van like this, but it's possible, you know. But a minivan, you're going to have room to put a toilet. A minivan, you're going to have enough room to put a full-size bed, a mattress, things like that. So definitely more space available in a minivan. Minivan is also still going to give you that stealth solution. You can park a minivan anywhere. Go to the nearest grocery store, take a look around. It's full of minivans. So if you cover up your windows, you go park your minivan somewhere, nobody's gonna think twice if they see you there. Little do they know you're inside, taking a little nap, making a little lunch, who knows? So minivan, lots and lots of advantages. The first disadvantage I would say is that lots of minivans are older. They don't make as many minivans as they used to. I grew up with a Chevy Astro. I always wanted to turn a Chevy Astro into a camper type van, and there are Chevy Astros out there, but Chevy Astro has been discontinued for 20 years. So best case scenario, you're buying a 20-year-old vehicle that probably has medium to high miles on it. The Astro was replaced, I believe, by the Uplander, which has been discontinued, which was replaced by the Traverse, which has been discontinued, which was replaced by another model, which has been discontinued. So there's also the Dodge Caravan, you know, Dodge Caravans. So here's the disadvantage. They've discontinued the Dodge Caravan. Here's the advantage. In the US alone, they sold more than 2 million Dodge Caravans, which means not only are there a lot of Dodge Caravans out there still running, but the ones that aren't are sitting in junkyards or are being sold for parts. So, you know, that is one of the things. There's a lot of Chevy Astros out there. Those, what is it, a 4.3 Vortec V6 engine? There's millions of them. So if you have engine problems or whatever, there are parts still available. So that, I guess, would be an advantage, even though it's a disadvantage that minivans are aging. So anyway, recap minivans. You got good mileage. You don't have as much headspace as you have in a normal van. You still have stealth. It's not a bad choice. It's really not a bad choice. Now, next is a van like mine. We're talking about a cargo style van, a Chevy van, a full-size van, a Ford van, not the high tops. We'll talk about those in a minute. But a traditional, when most people say van, people my age, when you say a van, this is what you think of, a big van. Lots of advantages to these. Number one, you got space, especially if you start with a cargo van like mine. There's no seats. I mean, this is a blank canvas. You could turn this into anything you want. You could have seating for one, you could have seating for four. You could have a bed that folds down, a stationary bed. You can put in sinks. You could have work, whatever your dream of a van is, there's enough room to do it in here. Also, this is where you can start putting things on your roof. I have a Max Air fan. I have a solar panel. You also have room for van stuff, like you could start putting in small shower solutions. You could put in, you know, take more water. Everything gives you more batteries, more all that stuff that you don't have room for in a smaller van. Now, there are disadvantages. I would say number one, this is where your mileage is going to start dropping. Minivans, still, there's lots of minivans that get 20 miles to the gallon or close to, not this. My van gets just under, between 14 and 15 miles per gallon. So the more weight you add, the less mileage you're going to get. So the more I put in here, it keeps going down. And if the engine hasn't been kept up, if there's maintenance that needs to be done, it's also going to cause it to go down. So mileage is going to be a problem. I would say this is the largest size you can get away with stealth camping. I do stealth camping in my van quite a bit, but there are places where I can't. And I would say on the negative, I'm going to just put this in air quotes, but let's call it the creep factor. I have a white cargo van with no windows. So in the 80s and 90s, when there were all these news stories about kids getting abducted in vans, this is the van they would show. They would literally show a cargo van with no windows. So there are places where I do feel comfortable stealth camping, but hanging out in a park, sometimes I feel a little weird. There's a skate park right across the street over here. Sometimes I feel weird just parked at the skate park with kids looking out and seeing this van. And I certainly wouldn't have it parked on the street on Halloween with a sign that says free candy. So there are a few disadvantages to a van like this. Now let's get into the big vans. Now we're talking those high top vans. This is the dream for every van lifer. We're talking the Mercedes Sprinter. We're talking Ford Transit. We're talking, you know, the Dodge, like the ProMaster, right? These are vans that you can stand up in. So that's the difference and where I'm differentiating between my van and those type of vans. So what are the advantage? I mean, space. Some of those vans are huge. Winnebago uses one of those vans as a base for their small RV. So, you know, in a van that's that size, now you're talking many of the advantages, it's like a mini apartment. There are lots of advantages to living in that. Now, here's the disadvantages. Number one, price. A new ProMaster, I think, is $60,000 to $70,000. So if you find yourself having to live in a vehicle, that might be out of your price range. That's definitely out of my price range. You could find cheaper ones with lots of miles, especially the diesel engines. I see those, the ones that are in my price range have 200 to 300,000 miles on them. So, you know, it's not for me, but if you could do it, if you're gonna afford one of those with lower miles, man, I mean, that is the way to go. I would say those high top vans are also pushing the limits of what I would want to have for my daily driver. I don't, but I could drive this van as a daily driver, but you know, as a daily driver type vehicle, you're talking about maneuvering downtown. You're talking about moving in and out of traffic, all that stuff. And also parking can become an issue on those bigger vans. I'm okay with parking this on the side of the street. I could park this in normal parking lots, but when you get those longer type of vehicles or taller vehicles, you may not be able to park it everywhere. So lots of advantages to the interior, but some disadvantages when it comes to driving around, maneuvering and parking those things and affording them. So I haven't been changing the camera or moving locations as some sort of artistic choice. The reality is the GoPro has stopped twice due to overheating. It is 102 degrees today outside. I was standing in the shade and my watch says 98 degrees. So it's super hot, so I had to move the camera, the GoPro, inside the van. So this is where I will finish my list, unfortunately. So let's get on to number 8, which is one of my favorite dream vehicles, and the logistics are too much for me. I'm talking about the school bus, aka the Skoolie. I mean, I think even before I had heard of van life, we all knew of school bus life, right? Skoolies, people that bought school buses and turned them into homemade RVs. Like, that was definitely the dream. So what are the advantages of doing a school bus? The advantages, I should say, well, number one, unlimited space. I mean, obviously there is a finite amount of space, but compared to things like a camper on the back of your truck or a minivan or something like that, a school bus just seems like unlimited opportunity. You know, in a van like mine, I can put a small bed. In a school bus, you could put, you know, queen size bunk beds. You could put whatever you want in a school bus. So, I mean, that I would say it would be the advantage. Also, believe it or not, school buses are pretty affordable. I have seen school buses for sale for less than what I paid for this van. I paid $6,000 for this van, but I've seen school buses for $4,000 and $5,000. With a reasonable amount of miles. I mean, 100,000 miles or less, you know. So, I mean, school buses, I think, are a really cool choice. Now, what are the disadvantages? Many disadvantages. So, first of all, a school bus is a different type of vehicle. And I mean that literally and figuratively. You're not going to take a school bus into one of the Walmart bays and have them change a flat tire for you. You are not going to pull it into Jiffy Lube and have them change your oil. You are not going to have normal AAA car insurance and have your bus break down and AAA is not going to show up and tow it to the nearest place. I mean, there are going to be logistics involved in owning and driving a school bus. One of the other big things that comes into play is insurance. Insurance companies don't necessarily love people taking vehicles and turning them into campers and trying to get those things insured. Some people get them changed to RVs, classified as RVs. Some people, when they do it, before they could get insurance, they have to show the build out to their insurance provider. Some people have been rejected. Some will only get insurance or can only get insurance if it's a professional build, not a homemade build. There's just a lot involved. So the dream of owning a school bus, I mean, 10 out of 10. Who doesn't want to do that, right? The reality is there's just a lot of logistics. You're not going to drive a school bus as your daily driver. You're not going to get a school bus through the drive-through at Taco Bell. You are not going to parallel park a school bus downtown. You are not going to go to the nearest neighborhood and park in front of someone's house in a school bus without upsetting them or getting them to call the police. There's just so many things. I mean, I think when you're moving into Skoolie land, I think you are relegating yourself to RV parks for places that are designed for you to park. I think stealth camping at that point is over for you. I mean, would it be a super cool lifestyle? Yep. I'm not shooting it down. I think it would be, I personally think it would be super fun to do, but it's out of my out of my wheelhouse. I couldn't do that. So advantages, but lots of disadvantages. You really better think hard before you buy a school bus. And I'll tell you this is a telling thing for me. I'll leave it at this. If you go to Facebook Marketplace, you can find a lot of school buses that people have started converting and abandoned. So I always think, why did that happen? That's always something that's in the back of my mind when I see this. Anyway, enough about Skoolies. The step up from Skoolie, full-fledged RV. An RV, if you have to live in a vehicle, who wouldn't want to live in an RV? If there are Sprinters and ProMasters that look like mini apartments, there are RVs that are way nicer than my first apartment and my second apartment. I mean, RVs have come so far. All you need to do is go to the north. Like, we have a local RV park and we've gone and looked at them. They're amazing. RVs are amazing. You could get full-size refrigerator. You could get a full-size stove. You could get a bedroom. You could get a shower that looks like a shower that's nicer than the one that was in my first apartment. I mean, all the amenities of being at home. You can live in an RV and not feel like you are giving up anything. Let's talk about disadvantages. Number one, I mean, you have to mention price, because we looked at an RV at an RV park and it was $175,000. We were not looking to buy, we were just window shopping, but we noticed that it was $175,000. That's a different league. That's different than, you know, I need to live out of my sedan or I'm going to live in a van or whatever. Like, that's a different lifestyle. And it's super awesome and it's super fun. But there's more than just, if you talk about money about RVs, there's more than just the cost of buying it. Now you've got the cost of operating it. You know, if you're looking at an RV, I mean, you're looking at less than 10 miles to the gallon. You're looking, we rented one, which I'll talk about briefly. We rented one that got between 7 and 8, and it was a Class C, so the smallest of the three types of RVs. And it was 7 to 8 miles per gallon. So you are going to, it's not just the initial purchase. You're going to be paying a lot. If you look for used RVs, you'll see that a lot of them have leaks. A lot of them need fiberglass repair. A lot of them have engine issues that need to be dealt with. I mean, it's just like any other vehicle, but more because it's this big moving thing that twists and turns. And a lot of RVs aren't made for long term. Like, a lot of RVs, after 5, 6, 7 years, you see a lot of things falling apart on them. So, I mean, it's... I mean, if money is no object and you have to live in something, yeah, sure, buy an RV. The other thing is, again, we're at a size of vehicle where you're not going to be stealth camping an RV. You're going to be at RV parks, so there's a cost involved in that. So just, again, more than just the money up front. You got money to purchase, money to operate, money to maintain. If you live in a neighborhood like I do, I have no place to park an RV, so now you're talking about paying to store an RV. This is if you're not doing full-time. If you are doing full-time, then you're going to be paying lot fees or things like that. So a lot of things to consider about living in an RV, but man, it does sound like fun. The last thing, I'm just going to make this miscellaneous category, and here's what I'm going to put in there. Box trucks, ambulances, and shuttle buses. These are all different types of vehicles that when you look at them, you think this would be an interesting vehicle to convert into something to travel in, to camp in, and possibly to live in. And if you want to talk about the advantages of these things, number one, they all have a lot of room. A box truck has a lot of room. An ambulance, once it has been gutted, has a lot of room. So do shuttle buses. But the disadvantages of these things are more than a lot of people think of. And they even have the advantage of, a lot of times you'll find these things with low mileage. Now, ambulances are a little different. You may find them, they may have low mileage, but the engine may have a lot of hours because they do a lot of idling. But you may find ambulances with low mileage. I find shuttle buses online all the time with low mileage, and the same for box trucks. The thing is, what wears out on those types of vehicles are not necessarily the engines. You know, if you have a shuttle bus, the seats are going to wear out first. The carpet, the storage racks, things like that are going to wear out before the engine. So I see a lot of shuttle buses for sale with 100,000 miles on them, and these are 15 and 20-year-old vehicles. So very low mileage considering the age of the vehicle. The downside of these things is a lot of the same things that we talked about. Number one is insurance. That's going to be difficult. Number two, storing and converting and driving these things. They all have unique problems. You know, a shuttle bus, there was a YouTube video I just watched where a lady had a shuttle bus and showed up at a park, like a campsite, and there was nowhere for her to park. They didn't have spots that were big enough for her shuttle bus. You know, box trucks seem like a good idea, but that it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And ambulances, here's what I would tell you about ambulances. And I could do an entire video about ambulances, but instead, here's what I will point you to. Down in the notes down at the bottom, I'm going to put a link to one of my favorite podcasts, the Built to Go podcast, which is a van life podcast. Jeff Wagg does an amazing job. He has done so many episodes covering different things about vans and van life, and he owns an ambulance, and he has an episode called Here Are the 10 Reasons Not to Purchase an Ambulance and Convert an Ambulance. I will link to that down there. So they have a lot of little traps and secrets that other vehicles don't have. Miles of wiring. Just for starters, there's a lot to deal with on ambulances. So this is all the main types of vehicles I could come up with. What is the best vehicle to live in? Well, let me give you the cop-out answer. The cop-out answer first is whatever vehicle you have. Like if you find yourself unhoused, displaced, and you have a vehicle, you can live in it. There are people living in Honda Civics. There are people living in pickup trucks, all kinds of vehicles. People do live in it. It may not be the most comfortable. You may be doing something where you're working up towards another vehicle, but you can live out of any vehicle. If I had to live in a vehicle and I were going to be doing urban camping, that means stealth camping in a city, moving from spot to spot, not paying for camping, being basically a nomad, the vehicle I would probably choose, which may not be the answer you're expecting, would probably be a minivan, because I think a minivan gives you most of the space that you get in a van like mine, but it gives you ultimate stealth capabilities. When people see a Honda Odyssey or a Dodge Caravan parked inside a car park or a parking lot or Walmart, there's no way they think somebody is living out of that thing. So if that were the needs that I had to meet, which again would be ultimate stealth camping, and you're still getting good mileage, you're still getting all those other advantages, it would probably be a minivan. Second would be a van like this one, like a full-size van, not a tall van. Again, you get those advantages of being able to stand and move around, and it's a lot more space. It's a whole different ball game, but you give up those stealth capabilities. So it all depends on what's most important to you. Now, what vehicles have I left out? I know I've left something out that you're thinking of, you thought I was going to say and I didn't. Please put that down in the comments. If there's advantages or disadvantages that I didn't mention, also leave those down there and I will discuss that. I'm moving to a new format where I'm going to be doing 2 videos a week. On Wednesday, I'm going to be releasing videos like this where I answer questions and talk about things. And then on Sunday, you'll see my normal camping. It'll be a video, either a project I've done on the van or a stealth camp or something like that. You'll see those on Sunday. So I'm hoping to get videos on Wednesdays and Sundays, but Wednesdays I'll be answering questions. So if you have a different question, leave it down there in the comments and I will answer it on a future episode. So thank you to all my subscribers. Thank you to everyone who watches, everyone who clicks like, everyone who clicks subscribe, all my Patreon followers, and everyone who has bought me a coffee. I feel like I'm winning an Academy Award here. Thank you. Thank you. I love you all. Jesus, it's hot today. First of all, I literally just caught a flying bug on me. Ugh. A helicopter?